Welcome everyone to the SID United States 2022 Career Fair. We are extremely excited that you are joining us today. We have a lot to get through on the agenda, starting with this session on the many paths of international development. Before we get started, I just want to say a word of thank you to our sponsors, ACD-IVOCA, International Development Group, and MENA. We truly could not make this event happen without our sponsors, and so we are very grateful for their support, and we encourage you all to visit their booths during the exhibit hall from 12 p.m. Eastern Time to 5 p.m. Eastern Time today. For those who are not familiar, SID United States is the largest and most active chapter of the Society for International Development, which was founded in 1957 to serve as a global forum dedicated to sustainable economic, social, and political development. Some things to note for this session. We are recording this session and we'll be sharing it publicly through our network and social media. Live transcription and closed captioning is available and can be turned on through your individual Zoom settings. If you have any questions, we encourage you to put them in the Q&A box. We will have about 20 minutes at the end of this session for Q&A. So if you have any questions for the speakers, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. And we'll keep the chat box for conversations and being able to introduce yourself. But for questions for the speakers, please put them in the Q&A. And please note if it's for a specific speaker. And unfortunately, given the limited time, we may not be able to answer all of the questions. With that, I'm going to pass it to our moderator for this session, who is going to introduce our panelists. So it is my pleasure to introduce Zahabya Mama from Chemonics International, who will be moderating this session on the many paths of international development. Zahabya, over to you.
Hi all, thanks Dan. It's great to be here. Thanks for joining us. To all the participants, thank you SID-US for having us. We hope that you're all able to take advantage of the career fair, talk with a lot of exhibitors. But before we dive into the intros, I did want to let you all know the format because we really do want you all to drive conversation. So after intros, I will ask our speakers a few questions, but the last 20 minutes we have held for all of you. So please do use the Q&A box because we want to see what you are most interested in learning or understanding. We all may be virtual, but we do want this to be as interactive as possible. So welcome again. My name is Zahabya Mama. I'm a program manager in the Europe and Eurasia region in Chemonics International. I've been at Chemonics for over 2.5 years. Been on about 5 different projects and business development teams, and I'm currently split between a USAID and OTI portfolio. Prior to Chemonics, I was actually, I'm rejoining my colleagues at SID-US. I was at SID-US for another 2 years in Dan's position, so it is really great to come full circle and to be here with you all. So with that, I am going to now introduce our speakers, Erin Brown, who's the Interim Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator, Lead Management and Program Analyst at USAID, Amina Musa, Program Manager, Princeton in Africa, and Ubuntu Olson, who's an independent consultant and a SID-US Workgroup co-chair. So all of these speakers have had varying experience in international development, and they're all here today to not only answer your questions, but here to support you all in this next generation of international development professionals. So with that, I'll turn this over to Erin.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, based upon where you are in the world. My name is Erin Brown. I am with the United States Agency for International Development in the Bureau for Management. I came to USAID in 2012 as a Franklin Fellow upon leaving the private sector because I decided on a career change. And I've been at USAID ever since, first in the Office of the Administrator as a senior advisor, and now as a lead analyst in the Bureau for Management. And since being at USAID, I also had the opportunity to be our interim DEIA Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Coordinator, where I stood up the DEIA program in the Office of the Administrator and handed it over to our new Chief Diversity Officer, who was a political appointee. Prior to USAID, I actually was in the private sector for 13 years, starting at IBM Global Services, then moving to KPMG Consulting, which became Bearing Point, then Deloitte, And then before becoming a senior principal, leading a practice called Building Effective Organizations at Group, where I specifically work within the federal sector. And so my background is more strategic planning, continuous process improvement, organizational change management, and performance management. But there is still a place for people like me at USAID. And so if there are any of you with that type of background, I encourage you to listen up. Over.
Wonderful. I'll pass it over to Ryan now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Ubuntu Olson, and currently I am an independent consultant on my way to a top 3 implementing partner of USAID to help support their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, as all of us should be doing. Prior to that, and for the past decade, I worked at the Palladium under the USAID and PEPFAR funded health policy projects, leading efforts around stigma and discrimination in global health, particularly around HIV and gender and sexual diversity. Prior to all of that, I was a young pup who was, a rah activist for LGBT human rights, and found my way all over the world, getting to do some amazing things, from living in Kenya and working alongside their amazing activists there, the Harvey Milks of the world, if you will. And then moving on to the United Nations, where I got to do additional advocacy work around religiously based homophobia. Didn't know where I was going, didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had a passion for the ability for us to believe in ourselves as human beings and our rights as LGBT people. So I knocked on doors and stumbled through the halls of now Palladium. So that's a little bit of my story. I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you, Ryan. And now last but certainly not least, Amina.
Hi, everyone. Nice to join you all. I saw some people from the chat are from Worcester, from Clark. And so nice to see you all. I'm the program manager at Princeton, Africa. I've been here a little over 2 years. And through Princeton, Africa, we really kind of connect young leaders to year-long professional fellowships across the African continent. And someone of the African diaspora, I spent a lot of my career so far studying identity, culture, and positive social change. And so I studied sociology in undergrad, and sociology always kind of causes you to reflect on yourself, but I always looked at that in directly linked with what positive social change is. So I've worked for various nonprofits in the US. I've worked on cultural festivals in East Africa as well as Europe. And a lot of that is really just kind of raising the visibility of culture and kind of honestly like reclaiming the narrative and kind of offering more resources for people to have access to, specifically, I worked in Somali cultural festivals. And so Somalis have a public perception that I'm sure we're all aware of, but really kind of offering a way of dignifying that narrative, but also kind of having great spaces to bring very different and diverse people together to push forward positive social change. So really glad to be here with you all. And looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Amina, Erin, and Ryan. So we're going to dive in. And again, I'll make another quick plug for the Q&A box. Please do use that, drive the conversation. We want to hear what you have to say, and that'll happen at around 10:40. So without further ado, I'll ask my first question, which is broad, and hopefully all of our speakers will, with all of their varying experience, will come at this with different answers. So first question is, when you were starting your career, what advice or skills did you wish you had within international development or just in general and more broadly? And I'll start here with Erin.
So funny that you should ask that. Given the nature of what I do for USAID, which is essentially I and my team function as internal consultants. So what I learned in the private sector directly applies. I'm just able to do this within the context of international development. So for me, it's not so much that what skills that I wish that I had, even though I think that from a knowledge and awareness perspective, some of the priorities and the direction of international development is something that I wish I knew more of before I joined USAID. But for someone like me, with, my background in political science, first master's in public policy, focus on national security. USAID, international development, it was never on my radar. So I think that even just basic awareness of international development as a field is what I needed. And I was lucky to have an opportunity to learn on the job. However, that's not the way that I would go. And so I think that organizations like SID, like USAID, need to do more to broaden awareness of international development as a field, especially for those that are from traditionally underrepresented groups in international development, and going through minority serving institutions and working through community organizations in order to broaden awareness of the field overall. Over.
Great, thank you, Erin. Ryan or Amina, does any of those sentiments also maybe relate to your experiences, the broad awareness, or wishing that you had some of those more tacit skills? Ryan, I see you're unmute. Please feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. I relate 1000%. And as I mentioned, I stumbled into this field not even really knowing what international development was. In fact, it wasn't until 3 months into my internship that I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. What is this? So I think having, if I could have entered the field with a lot more of a broader understanding of the field itself, but also the many different paths that are possible, I think I would have charted out a course for myself in a way that would have, I mean, I can't say I'm not successful. I went from being an intern to now a globally recognized gender and human rights expert. So, I mean, but I think maybe that's where the spirit of, I might be a little unique as well. And that is being able to raise your hand, be an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, really just kind of feel things out is a really important part of this field, because, we're all in one way, adapting as we go along. And I think to build on it, in addition to making more avenues to this field possible, the fact that you all are even on this call in the first place, that you're aware of it, already gives you a leg up, let's be real. But I think we need to bring more people in. And I think having a much broader awareness of our global positionality as practitioners, I think is also really key. So being able to know what's happening in other cultures around the world, the variances that take place from the complex context in which we work, in addition to language skills, I think all not only make you successful, but will help you eventually make the impact you want in the field of development. One last thing is also being not afraid to take on different types of roles. Some of us may be able to start off as technical experts in an area, right? I was fortunate because I had my LGBTI background. It fit for the organization I did. But you know what? I also would have loved my operational role, because that would have given me a really strong structural understanding of the organization. And the last thing about broadness is just understanding the different types of organizations, from small NGOs to private sector firms to USAID itself. Having that broad understanding and of the complex nature of this work can actually help set you up for where you ultimately want to be. Thank you.
One thing that I just kind of want to write on the tailcoats of that is really, I studied sociology, international studies, and the university that I was at was very internationally focused. So that was a bonus, but then at the same time, the practical application of what does that look like in the workforce was kind of missing. And I think we have now the subject matter expertise is really available, but the practical skills and how does that translate into internships or job experiences. So really kind of echoing what they both said about accessibility, and that can look like a bunch of different things. But really kind of trying out different things. And it's not always that you just need to go spend a year in the field. Even locally where you live, there are diverse communities of immigrants, of refugees, that you can kind of gain all of those like cultural competencies while living locally. And then also kind of shift how you understand your positionality, but also understand all these kind of global phenomenons that you're learning about. They're also taking place in the environment that you live in. And so how do you kind of connect that with what's going around in the world. So really don't limit yourselves and use every space that you're in as a learning opportunity.
Absolutely. And I feel like something that you all have been really hitting on with this question is for, our participants who have skills that might relate, of course, to international development. There are so many paths. And so my quick follow-up question is, how can our participants illustrate their skills either in an interview or a cover letter? Do you have any direct advice of how our participants can really engage with an interviewer or engage on a resume or cover letter? And I'll hand this over to anyone who wants to answer. Amina, Ryan.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Absolutely. So how can our participants illustrate their skills in an interview or in a cover letter? Yes, Ryan.
Well, can I just say, I think outside of just a cover letter and a interview, I think doing your best to, I'm an ultimate networker, okay? I love meeting people for informational interviews, going to coffees, making sure you buy the coffee, and asking people about their careers. I think that helps set the stage so that when your resume comes up, people can be familiar with who you are. I'm not saying that that's as a DII practitioner, I know that's not the best way, so sorry for already admitting that, but I think that being able to know people really does help you then go back to those interviews and speak the language and get the vernacular of the particular role. And that speaks to the cover letter itself. Make sure you're actually using the language included in the job posting, because that can help show that you understand what you're talking about. So.
And may I jump in? Because I want to emphasize what Ryan said, which in speaking from a USAID perspective, your currency is your network at USAID. And it's also your currency, even if you're trying to get into USAID, because, in order to, understand what opportunities are available, how to get advice on how to best position yourself, to help who are the other people that you should have in your circle of advisors or mentors. Those I would highly recommend, to the extent that you can help to strengthen your network, do those informational interviews, because I know I do them all the time. Then that would be great. The second thing is that when I'm in an informational interview, I am making a determination as to whether or not your skills are applicable within the context of my job, right? So those informational interviews do the work for you, right? Because you don't have to tell me that. I can hear by what you say how it may fit and make a determination for myself as to whether or not you would be a good fit. It happens all the time. And then as far as your, as cover letters and resumes, I've had examples when I've been on interview panels for other bureaus within the agency, where I have now seen the value of a cover letter. I didn't used to value a cover letter. If you have the opportunity to do a cover letter, then do it. And I say that because you are better able to explain in a more robust way how your experiences are relevant to whatever job it is that you're applying for, and much better than bullets on a resume. And yes, we do read them. So if you have an opportunity to do a cover letter, I would highly recommend that you do it, because I know that common advice is, don't worry about the cover letter, nobody looks at them. Lies, we do. So please do so if you have the opportunity to.
Great, thank you. Amina.
Yeah, I would just like to say real quick about the cover letter and the interview. It's another opportunity really to kind of present yourself, what you've done and where you want to go. I think especially early career, kind of looking at your self-starter, what type of like personal projects are you working on? A lot of people, a lot of candidates that I speak to, like for the fellowship agency that I work, organization that I work for now, kind of don't think about the projects that they've done while they were in university, or like if they have a podcast, those are comm skills, social media skills, you know. Really don't limit yourself in the ways in which you're presenting yourself through this. If you didn't do it at a previous job, you know, the world is vastly different, and you can create your own online profile and kind of go from there. So really take advantage of all the resources that you have available and don't sell yourself short.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think something that all of you are also touching on is, you know, the importance of the informational interviews, the importance of networking, and, you know, both are really great and both are really important in order to help enter the international development sector. I mean, even myself, SID-US was the best place for me to be. I learned about so many organizations I had never heard about before, and is how I'm here at Chemonics. So that kind of leads into my next question of, what advice do you have for those starting their career in international development? And what ways can you enter the sector besides informational interviews and networking? And especially if you come from a non-traditional or a marginalized background. And Amina, I'll start with you on this one.
I would say that, so outside of informational interviews, also really kind of take advantage of the resources that you have available, whether that's professors, whether that's, you know, volunteer opportunities locally. There's also fellowship opportunities. You can intern locally, and really kind of diversify the spaces that you find yourself in. To not limit yourself. If you're interested in health, for example, then you could, public health is really huge now. So go to different events in your city, really kind of take advantage of everything that you can. I would also say the importance of having job experience, whether that's volunteer experience, whether that's internships while you're in university, and really kind of build upon that to kind of or strengthen your networks. But also, if you're from a marginalized or non-traditional background, also, if you're from an immigrant community, for example, and you go do work in your local community, whether that's your community back home, that's still ways that you're engaging in this work. And being involved in faith-based organizations or whatever type of societal organizations that you find yourself a part of, that is still ways that you're gaining transferable skills, and really kind of think about the ways in which those transferable skills that you have could then pivot into international development, but also do as much research. There's lots of podcasts. I think research and accessibility is kind of the biggest thing that's a barrier, but now with this highly social digital age, a lot of that is available online, and really utilize the internet to kind of create a platform for yourself and kind of create your own narrative as well.
And I'd like to jump in from a USAID perspective. Understanding the makeup of the workforce at USAID is helpful to you. Your only opportunities are not just civil service and foreign service. That is actually, civil service and foreign service are actually the minorities. So as far as the workforce, we only comprise 1/3 of USAID's workforce. The majority of USAID workforce are either country cooperating nationals, formerly known as foreign service nationals, or personal services contractors, for which there are opportunities advertised on sam.gov, or institutional support contractors. When you are just starting your career, I would highly recommend it. If there's an institutional support contractor opportunity available, take it. Why? I have been 3 different mechanisms, and of course, I wasn't, when I came to USAID, I wasn't fresh on the scene. I was already, 13, 14 years in. That being said, I came in as a fellow. I then became an institutional support contractor. Through my work as an institutional support contractor, I gained the visibility and was able to make the relationships or form the relationships necessary for when the opportunity became available as a civil servant. They knew who I was. I was a known commodity, and it was easier for me to get the opportunity when it became available. So if you are looking for an opportunity fresh, I mean, if you're fresh out of school, I would highly recommend, or if you're in school now, there's the Pathways Internship Program. Please apply to the internship program when it becomes available at USAID. We have doubled the number of interns that we can have at the agency, and that was at the direction of our administrator, Samantha Power. The second thing is that if you want to, if you are Peace Corps or a return Peace Corps volunteer, there's a mechanism for return Peace Corps volunteers at USAID that is a non-competitive mechanism. So that is something else that you would want to look into. And then going back to the institutional support contractor, you literally have the ability to be able to not only do work that's within the scope of work associated with your particular contract position, but when detailed opportunities become available, like for the COVID task force or things like that, you have the opportunity to work on some really meaty projects or initiatives at the agency level, and again, expand your network and build your resume. So I would highly recommend looking at the various institutional support contractors, and we have dozens at USAID, and apply for opportunities there.
Please, Ryan.
Just one quick one, and this is more the philosophical person in me, but if we're looking at trends on how people bring themselves into the workplace, whether that's younger generations who believe in the totality of who you are and you shouldn't have to become someone else, to the effects of the pandemic where a lot of our work now is remote and our lives are so intertwined. I think as you face the world, particularly as a marginalized or vulnerable person, strike that balance between don't give up too much of yourself either. And you are going to face microaggressions and people who won't believe in you because you're a young person or because you're from a different background. And that will be hard. And you've probably already faced a lot of that already. In fact, some of that might even give you a strength because you can face the world each day and still get up, when you've been put down. So bring that fight with you, but also don't lose yourself along the way. It's not about becoming like us or the industry. It's about bringing your best self to work. And if your best self is whoever is the most authentic you. And I know that I'm saying that from a place of privilege in a way. Not everybody feels like they can do that. I respect that. But just don't lose yourself in this process, because the more you can align your passions for this work with the work itself, you're going to be happier, but the work is going to be better. And so I just encourage you as you go through this gauntlet to don't lose yourself along the way. You've got it.
Thank you, Erin, Amina, and Ryan. And Ryan, I'm going to jump off of that too into my next question. All of you have also been mentioning when you started your career, Ryan and Erin, you've touched upon that you didn't expect to be in USAID, or you didn't know where your path in international development was going to go. So related to that, what barriers or challenges did you face in your career, and then how did you address them?
Well, I think for me, there's several layers. I think being a young person was challenging because I think people thought I was naive. In certain ways I was, but in other ways I was like, yo, I just left school. I haven't been out of school for 20 years. I got the latest research right here. I think the other piece is my effervescent personality. I'm a very outgoing, and I don't like wearing this. And sometimes that's how you make the difference, is just kind of nudging in a little bit. And then finally, I was just so passionate about LGBT human rights that it wasn't so much about the job, but the work itself. And so wherever that work, the job led me, so long as I was aligning myself with those passions, that's what I did. And I was able to, at first I was really afraid to speak up in meetings because I didn't, the senior people, and I respect them deeply. And I don't want to dismiss people who have been doing this work for so long and have set the stage for all of us. But at the same time, being able to, step in there and not be afraid to use your own voice, your own experience, and ask the hard questions, even if you may be wrong. Because, the more you do it, the better you're going to contribute and the more you're going to learn as well. So keep at it.
Thank you, Ryan. Amina or Erin, if you have other barriers or challenges during your career and how you address them, please feel free.
Well, when I first graduated from University of Chicago, as I mentioned, I went to, and then this is outside of the context of international development, so this is just broader career. I joined IBM Global Services, young, eager, all high standard of excellence, get it done type of personality. And I, by the third year, I was recognizing that people that had come in that did not look like me, despite the fact that I'm a humble person. I'm just going to qualify that. But I could run circles around these people, and I was running circles around those people. But I was not doing what they were doing. Right? When you grow up predominantly in an African American home, especially me being from the Deep South, I'm from Louisiana. Your parents and mine are from the silent generation. They born in the Depression. They told me that you work hard, you pay your dues, and if you work hard and you pay your dues, you're gonna get ahead. Lies. Those are lies. Necessary but not sufficient. That's really what it boils down to. Necessary but not sufficient. And so I learned that lesson the hard way when I got to the private sector. And so I was doing the work, everything was on time, under budget, excellence, clients, really pleased with my work. But every time that I asked about that promotion, I was told that they needed a little more time. They needed to see more. But yet people that came in behind me were getting promoted ahead of me. And I had to make a decision and be brave. And this was around the 2002 time frame. Enron exploded, consulting companies that were kind of flailing around. And then we were on the edge of a recession. I had to make a decision as to whether or not in that type of environment, whether or not I would stay and continue to be passed over, or if I would put myself out there and go to another firm. And I was told that there's no way that anybody's going to hire you at a time like this, where, kind of, on the edge of recession, blah, blah, blah. And I put myself out there anyway and ended up at KPMG Consulting in 2002 as a senior consultant. By 2004, I was a manager. By 2006, I was a senior manager. So when you go and put yourself in environments that will uplift you, and there are no complete meritocracies. Please don't think that such thing really exists, but there are those environments where they see the work that you do and they will seek to support you and uplift you. And those are the types of environments that you deserve to be in. And so don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't listen to the naysayers, because if they had it figured out, guess what? They would have already been there. So I will go ahead and say, put yourself out there, and you just never know what's going to happen. And then I did it again when it came to Deloitte, on the edge of becoming a director or a principal. Oh, we need to, now that you've just been acquired, we need more time. Okay, so I went to Hay Group, senior principal, now leading my own practice. So believe in yourself, right? I know imposter syndrome can sometimes creep in. The words, what is it? Death and life lie in the power of the tongue. But it's not just the tongue. It's also the words that you tell yourself, right? And so continue to tell yourself positive words, feed positive words into your spirit, because I believe you. What you think of, you're probably your own worst critic. And you are probably much more amazing than you give yourself credit for. And so don't be afraid to take your amazing self and put yourself out there to let the whole world to see, and put yourself out there for opportunities, because the people that are getting the opportunities are the ones that dare to be bold and get out there anyway. So I'll stop. I'll get off my soapbox. Because I could preach a sermon on this. I'll shut up now.
No, thank you, Erin. If only we had 2, 3, 4 more hours, I think everyone would love to keep chatting and talking with you. Yeah, Ryan's saying the same thing. Amina, before we go to our last quick questions, because again, I did promise that we're going to have a lot of time for Q&A, so we will be getting there. Amina, would you like to jump in with any last thoughts about this question? If not, I can.
I mean, it's hard to follow up, Erin. It's so much, but I would just like to say real quick, I think kind of being young and kind of starting out in a lot of these spaces, you might think that the imposter syndrome in the other way of I'm so early career, what can I offer type of thing. And I think that if you're in that space, you're meant to be in that space. And so kind of look at what you can offer. It's not about trying to compete with those who are 15, 20 years in their career, but from where you stand, where can you build and grow momentum? And then how can you kind of grow from there? I would say keep that in mind, as well as kind of dealing with the ebbs and flows. You might have been really excited about something, and now when you're in that place, you realize, oh, maybe this isn't really for me. So just thinking about just taking stock at every space, kind of where you're at, what's working, what's not working. And it's not that it's not that you didn't, that the experience was bad, or that, I mean, everything is a growing and learning opportunity, and kind of looking at everything that you're going through as a space to continuously learn and grow from.
Thank you, Amina, and thank you all of you for talking about your own barriers and challenges. It seems, especially from the chat, that some of our participants have felt similarly, and it's important that you're all here to talk about that and know that, you know, we're not all alone in those same feelings or thoughts. So very quickly, I did want to end on a positive note as well. And so I'm going to ask 2 quick questions directed towards Ryan and Erin. Ryan, what do you foresee the future for the future of international development? And Erin, what have you gained the most or appreciated the most about a career in international development? And then we'll go to Q&A.
Thank you. And I just want to, as I reach out to this audience, which I presume are a number of people who are rising into the field of international development, I also want you to take yourselves out of the day-to-day. Getting the job is really important, but I want to step back and realize the importance of development itself and the possibility of making the world a better place. And I know that seems so cliche, but when you really get down to the nitty-gritty of what we do as an industry, it really is about supporting people in their local context for who they are, not what we think is best for them, and putting yourself out there. And there's no better, youth today are the ones that are gonna bring all of these new ideas, this innovation and creativity that will actually tackle the world's most pressing problems. Youth are the largest population out of all people in the world, and so we need you. And I really encourage you to read the article that was shared earlier in the chat that I shared that talks about some of the skill sets of the next generation development professional, because it's not just about your unique sector-specific niche skill set, it's about your ability to adapt, to bring empathy and compassion, and to relate to the other human beings around the world. That's what we're all on the same team at the end of the day. And so never forget that North Star that all of us ought to be shooting for. And that's the future of development.
Thank you so much. Erin, over to you.
What I'm about to say, I'm preaching to the choir, because you're all here. You clearly all have an interest, if not a passion, for international development. But when I, as an employee of the federal government, am asked about USAID, for those that have not heard about USAID, which is not a surprise, and for them to hear about the mission in and of itself is inspiring. I left the private sector in my early 30s. I left the private sector because I had hit a wall, because I had to believe that there was more to life than the bottom line. There was more to life than hitting my, $14 million sales target a year. There had to be more than that. And I also wanted to get back to my roots, so to speak. As I mentioned, in public policy, my area of focus was national security. And I literally stumbled upon the Franklin Fellows program. But by the time I got to the Franklin Fellows Program, I had already walked away from consulting. I was literally at a crisis moment where I'm like, what do I do with the rest of my life? What do I want to be when I grow up? And so I stumbled upon, Mr. Google. Mr. Google will tell you everything. And so I, stumbled upon the Franklin Fellows Program. And the Franklin Fellows Program is a program where you can still stay employed by your employer and be on basically a fellowship in exchange with USAID while you continue to get paid by your employer. Now, of course, by then I had already left my company. So I literally went to USAID through the Franklin Fellows Program and worked for USAID for $0 for an entire year on a hope and a prayer that somehow I will be able to navigate into the organization, burrow in somehow, some sort of way. And because in consulting, it's all about negotiation. As a business developer, it's all not negotiation, but networking. It's all about who you know and who knows you. I was able to use those skills to help me get an institutional support contractor position with 8 days left in my fellowship to go, 8 days. And ultimately after 2 years, become a civil servant. So I would say that I get back to the being bold, but also just be aware of the opportunities that are out there for all the various mechanisms. If you were looking to go to be at USAID, that there are multiple opportunities and multiple mechanisms as a way to get into the organization. But I hit a period of crisis and I ended up going to USAID, and thank God that gamble worked out. I don't recommend working for $0 a year, but I think that, again, that gets to the whole being bold and being willing to put yourself out there and take risks.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And again, as promised, we are getting into your questions, both in the Q&A box and on the chat. Will be doing my best to group these into 3. So speakers, I will be giving you a couple of questions all at once. And feel free, if one of you wants to answer, we can move on to another. If you want to jump in, that's okay too. So for the first set of 3 questions, this is about experience. What's the best type of early on experience for undergraduate students? One being, someone else mentions, do you have recommendations for international development organizations or agencies that offer maybe internships to college students or for undergraduate students? And then lastly, third question, as a career student, this participant feels like they have many valuable skills through their university, clubs, projects, and research. How can they convey their skills or show future employers that they are a strong candidate, even though they may not have the work experience that they're usually looking for? I'm happy to repeat any of those 3, trying to group this focused mostly on undergraduate experience and early on skills.
I'll go ahead and put myself out there. So for when I'm hiring, especially for contractor positions that I have, analysis skills, so analytical skills, well, especially at USAID where everything is about building evidence base, are golden. So if you have research projects that you did while in school, talk about the research project, the value of that, the potential that research project may have in the field of international development, or how it helped it to explore some new avenue. Put that out there, because those are the transferable skills and knowledge that I need on my team. And I can coach you into doing what it is that I need for you to do within the context of the team and the methodologies that we use. But having both the analytical skills and the right attitude, the entrepreneurial spirit, like, you know what, I may not know, but guess what? I'm willing to learn and I'm coachable. Be coachable. As long as you express that, I think that you will go far. Over.
I would also like to say real quick about the clubs and projects. Whenever you're looking at, when I started grad school, they told me to look at jobs that I wanted when I graduated and kind of build out backwards. But also just kind of look at various jobs that you're interested in now, and kind of see how your your background would align, but very much look at it from what have you achieved and what have you gained? And if you've been in a certain club for a couple of years, how have you been able to kind of move things forward? What are those kind of like stats to show your growth, that you're a self-starter, that you're a natural born leader, all of those type of things, to also kind of fit in with the specific job, sector, or role that you are trying to apply for.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on everything that's been said so far. I second all of it. I think specifically with your experience in college, I always find it fascinating that, they count years of professional experience as those where you're full-time, have benefits. And I'm like, I was leading the Gay Straight Alliance at a private Catholic school for 4 years in college. You know how much that prepared me for DEIA work? I mean, I'm telling you, and you don't want to count that? Oh my Lord. Anyway, long story short is speaking to what Amina said, link just so long as you can link what you did to the job itself, I think that's a huge win. And I think that that's something that we on our side, us professionals, Erin, nudging you, we need to make sure that we're not dismissing young people simply because they're young people or they weren't paid, right? So something we could work on ourselves in our organizations. The second piece is, especially in the last couple of years, we've been really trying to expand our internship programs at a number of organizations. So if you're not seeing them, it doesn't mean they're not there. Just be proactive, reach out to those organizations. Do you have internship programs? And the last thing I'll say is, are you really looking for an internship, or are you qualified enough for that analyst role, but you don't, like Erin said earlier, you just don't believe that you're qualified? I think I could have actually started off as an analyst, but I just wasn't convinced because I'd never heard of development before that I should just do an internship after having a graduate degree. So believe in yourself as well and go after those analyst roles too. And don't worry if it's not an internship. An internship is a good way. It's one way, but also put yourself out there a little bit too.
Thank you. Yeah, this is all really great to hear, and I can see from the chat that some of our participants are really hearing that, and it is something that also leads directly into the next set of questions that are similarly about entering the career path, but maybe in a mid-career jump or changing sectors. So for these three questions, do you have any tips or advice about mid-career switches into global development? Would you recommend getting a master's degree? If so, are there universities or programs that you would recommend looking at? And do you think there is a difference of when job hunting in international development in comparison with job hunting in the corporate world? And again, happy to repeat those three questions if needed.
Could you repeat those?
Yes, absolutely. So focusing on mid-career switches, do you have any tips or advice about mid-career switches into global development? And similarly, would you recommend getting a master's degree? If so, are there any programs that you would recommend looking into? And then is there a difference, do you think, between job hunting and international development, between job hunting in the corporate world?
So there's no difference between looking for jobs in international development and in the corporate world, since a large part of the sector technically is the private sector, right? And with all the implementing partners, with government, it most definitely is different if you're looking for civil service or foreign service opportunities, because those are typically competitively hired. However, again, there are a number of non-competitive hiring authorities that I can just hire someone off the street, like Schedule A. If you have a disability, they can hire you through the Schedule A, a non-competitive hiring mechanism. Return Peace Corps volunteers. Again, that was another one that I mentioned. So so with those that are non-competitive, those are more relationship based. But otherwise, it is strictly through USA jobs where you're applying for opportunities. Please know that USAID is in the midst of a hiring surge because Congress granted us authority to increase the numbers in our staffing pattern. So you should go on USA Jobs and keyword search USAID, and all the open opportunities, which include civil service and foreign service, will be on there. So that's one. Two, as far as recommending a master's, it depends. That's such a consulting answer. So civil service, we traditionally do not have a positive education requirement. And a lot of that is about our efforts in diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, right? We're not trying to have a bias against anyone based upon level of education. So if you're looking for a civil service position in the Bureau for Development, Democracy, and Innovation, or in the Management Bureau, or Policy Planning and Learning, more than likely, you do not need a master's. If you want to pay the money to get one, that's kind of on you, but you don't need one. Foreign service, you do need one. So if you're looking to go into foreign service, it does require a master's, because unlike State Department, we don't have a foreign service exam. And so kind of how we balance that out is that the requirement for foreign service is that you have a master's degree. And also for those that are looking to obtain master's degrees and you are from a traditionally underrepresented group in foreign service, there is the Payne Fellowship Program. That program will pay up to $104,000 for your for a 2-year degree, as well as providing you with internships on Capitol Hill and an admission. And when you graduate from successfully from the program, you are automatically entered into the foreign service. So those are the various opportunities that are available. Over.
Thank you. Ryan or Amina, do you have anything else to add, or I can jump into another quick question?
Yeah, I'm good. We put some stuff in the chat around master's programs.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes. And another plug that Dan did say, for our amazing panelists, feel free to answer questions directly that are coming in the Q&A box. I know for everyone here, the over 100 people, we're not going to be able to get to every question, but we hope that this is still fruitful and beneficial for you all. So with that, next question, and something that I think is important to touch upon, because we mentioned that informational interviews and networking is so important. So someone did mention that they love networking, but is not the best at keeping contacts once they've made them. Either they're in a different industry or this participant has moved away. So do you all have any tips on keeping up with people in our international development network?
I think I'm a pretty good networker, only because I think LinkedIn is great at keeping touch. And, you know, every time I post something, everybody that I've ever met may or may not see it, Erin. So like, you know, thinking that in mind, that's a great way to keep top of mind for people. And then of course, the casual nudge every once in a while, not ask. I hate when people ask for things, you know, like, can't only come out of the woodwork when you need something, you know, it's the worst feeling in the world. We do live in DC, so let's be real. But just be nice, okay? Say hello, how are you? Leverage birthdays, that's a good thing too. And you know, that's a way to keep in touch, is just simple, small things to say hi, follow up, do the 3, 6, 12 rule. So 3 months after, make sure you nudge, 6 months later, and then a year later, if you still, you know, just keep it going. I think that helps keep people top of mind. And just so long as you're top of mind, that's what's important. Sorry, one last thing. Authenticity matters. I do not do that just for networking purposes. I actually really care about every single person. Like, so please don't just be one of those people that does it just for something, you know, like, be real.
Thank you. Amina, Erin, anything else to add to, jump off of? If not, I'll go to another quick question.
He covered it. Excellent.
Love it. Thank you, Ryan. All right, so this question, I think, is also pertinent to this conversation and was asked in a few different ways. So how are we all practicing inclusivity in the work that we do? How are we ensuring that we're giving entry-level applicants the same opportunities that, you know, they wish they had when starting, especially as some of our organizations are known to be less inclusive?
So I'll go. So to a certain degree, my hands are tied by the staffing pattern that Congress approves, right? And so for those for the direct hire, civil service or foreign service that I have on my team, then I'm limited to that until I get approval otherwise. And please believe I keep begging, and no one's hearing me right now. But so how I supplement that is with institutional support contractor positions. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I have two junior analyst roles on my team. One, because the one person left and went to DAI because the DAI could offer more money, and one went to law school. And so I've got two openings on my team, and I continue to try and have those junior roles. And also, by the way, not just bring them in, but I have one of my junior analysts that actually I was able to lobby with the institutional support contractor to have her promoted to a mid-level analyst. So now she is getting more recognition, more pay. And so it's not just about bringing you in, it's about how we elevate you once you're in, right? And so, so yes, that's definitely something that I do, because diversity, equity, inclusion is extremely important to me. And as a person of color, I am more sensitive, I think, to those types of issues. Over.
Yes, Amina or Ryan, would you like to jump in?
So I work for an organization that provides fellowships for early career folks. But now we're really kind of focusing on accessibility to the fellowship. It started off as primarily within an Ivy League institution, and so now we are we've kind of strategically been involved in spaces like this, but also kind of minority serving institutions, HBCUs, kind of ensuring that that information and accessibility is available to folks that are traditionally underrepresented in these kind of spaces. And so a lot of it is also kind of looking at who is your main audience, like who are a lot of the candidates, where are they coming from, where do they have access to, and then also kind of strategically reaching out to different types of organizations or professional institutions. So it still is a kind of continuous work, but we have task force, like work groups within the organization, and committees. And so that's kind of something that's continuing to be a priority as we kind of carry out the work that we're doing on our team.
Yes.
And one last thing, I know we're at that time, but I just want to emphasize again, and as our fellow panelists has mentioned before, I want us all to also recognize we need to break down the hierarchical nature of which we think we're supposed to act. As Erin mentioned in her wonderful story, you think you do all the right things and that you still hit that ceiling. So remember, you as a young person actually have power. And I want, before you enter some of these organizations, why don't you in your interview process ask, what are you doing for people of color, for people with disabilities? How are you promoting gender equality? I don't know if I want to work with you if you don't do X, Y, and Z. Hold us accountable too. But then also, once you get in those organizations, don't stop asking those questions. And if you are stopped or held back because you ask those questions, don't be afraid to raise that with another person, because you know what, it's your right. It's all of our rights as employees and workers. And it's important for us to not only change the field for us, ourselves, but it's going to impact the ultimate work that we do by having a greater breadth of diversity across all of our efforts. Not just at USAID, but amongst implementing partners and NGOs as well. So put yourself out there. Remember, you as a young person actually have a lot of power. So don't forget that, and be confident in who you are as you move forward. Ask the questions that you're afraid to ask, because it'll help get you to where you want to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for staying with us. I know we're a bit over time. And so we just want to say again, thank you so much. We are so glad to be here, and we are on LinkedIn. You will see us on the agenda. It links us directly to LinkedIn. There are a couple of job openings that I've been seeing coming through the chat, so please take a look at that as well. Once again, thank you, SID-US, for having us, and thank you especially to you, Ryan, Amina, and Erin, for being such incredible speakers, panelists, activists, everything that you said today was very inspiring, and I hope that our participants now take that with them throughout the career fair and chatting with exhibitors. Thank you.
Your day.
Bye all.
Bye, everyone.